You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brook-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. If you're a man and your life is lacking real purpose and meaning, you may not know what it is, but you feel deep down that you're here for something more, something bigger, bolder, heartfelt, and soul-led. You're feeling isolated, lonely, and lacking the support and mentorship of men who really get you. And this only grows with each year that passes. Or if you're a woman and your body is calling to you to listen to her. She calls in many ways: pain, shame, numbness, tension, and sometimes a clear yes this way. You're so over trying to do and have it all, whilst feeling more worn out and less fulfilled. It is possible to live a rich, full life, but it rarely happens through being the nice girl or the ball breaker. If you resonated with any of those, then first of all, I hear you. You're really not alone. We keep seeing this in the men and women around us, even the ones who are a long way along their personal growth or spiritual paths. And that's why we created Waking the Wild Feminine and Waking the Wild Masculine. They're potent circles to support you in discovering your soul path and expressing your heart's truth, while being fully seen and held by a circle of your fellow men or women. It really is the most powerful, activating magic we know of. You can let us know you're feeling the call to either of those by going along to either primalhappiness.co/WTWF for Waking the Wild Feminine or primalhappiness.co/WTWM for Waking the Wild Masculine. If these are calling to you, then we really look forward to seeing you in circle soon. And now on to this week's show. It's with Joshua FalconCrest. Joshua is a leadership development trainer, filmmaker, author, and speaker. He loves using story and technology to assist people in remembering their true nature. He's the creator of Dow Play, an intuitively guided role-playing experience designed to escort people through their own personal movie scenes, the very situations they need to experience in order to release the past and reclaim their personal power. In this week's show, Joshua and I explored the topic of relating to our inner child as the same as relating to our bodies, the power of opening the pockets of shame created by trauma, and how we can enter into this work in a deeply nurturing and impactful way. This was such a deep and complex show, but with profoundly simple and practical takeaways. I really hope you take as much away from it as I did. Let's dive in. Hello, Joshua. Huge welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. So great to be here. I'm enjoying your energy already.
I am really excited. I was really looking forward to getting into this topic. And then when we were just talking and I was asking you, how would I describe it? I'm now like, oh, I can't wait now just to hear how we've even arrived at these two words, which are embodiment and Christing. So I am thrilled. So let's just start there. How did you get into, it feels a bit weird saying this line of work,
Right.
How did you get into this line of work?
It's purely been through healing myself and discovering what's true about myself and being able to, step myself out of all of the trauma and illusion that I was brought up in. And, liberation is just, for myself, has just always been my passion.
Wow. And it's interesting because when we first got into the topic that we're really going to dive deep into around the body and our connection to the body and nurture, when I was asking you kind of what words you used to describe that, it didn't surprise me when you said embodiment. And a lot of my guests have some background, even if they might not use the word embodiment, they might use the word embodiment. But I think you're the first person that's ever said Christing. So I would love to know, like, that what path has led you to that particular combination?
Yeah, it's been a path I've designed by myself. For the first 5 years or so of my work, my exclusive teacher in that process was the plant medicine cannabis, and most people have no idea how powerful this plant is when it's used in a certain way for healing trauma. And so I've been able to discover and design a method for using it, which I call expandibus. And I'm writing a book about this topic right now, actually. And it really helped me to understand this two-part issue, which is the sun, Christine courage, right? And then the bringing the energy of courage into the body, creating embodiment, which is, the earth. And the earth is also connected to the oversoul Ra, which is known by the Egyptians as the sun god. And so that's the origin of a lot of backwards programming for people. So there's a lot of, rewiring that I've been doing in myself because of all of these, a lot of deep misunderstandings from mostly religious contexts.
Oh, well, I love that. And we're clearly going to go really into that idea of kind of courage versus, I guess, nurture, or what would be a kind of what would you see would be the
nurture?
Yeah, nurture.
Yeah.
So let me know if you feel that we need to do a bit more groundwork on this first. But
sure.
What really hit me it was a post of yours that you shared on Facebook that really caught my attention about the way that you were talking about this idea of, and there was a couple of things. Let me just say the things that really stood out to me that I feel that really worthwhile diving into. So first was the way that you spoke about the body as being, I can't remember quite the language, but almost like a synonym for the inner child, like they could be seen as the same thing.
Yeah.
And I've heard people talk about that before, but there was something about the way you spoke about it that really hit me, like, wow, that's actually a really useful way to hold both, where we're not, the same conversations that we could be having, those of us who have kind of started to recognize the worth of talking to our body or in our child, actually the same conversation would apply really well and do it in one go. So that really hit me. Then there was, which I think is probably better to get into in a minute, which was the idea of the need for that real kind of like nurture, healing, tenderness, and how that creates almost like the foundation or the setting for then that kind of, challenge, courage, going out there, creating. And I love the way you spoke about like that as a cycle, and all of that needs to kind of be included. So they were the things that really, and the way you were languaging as kind of divine mother, divine father. So that really spoke to me. I could hear something really fresh in that was very applicable, very like I thought this is something that I am finding a really useful way of talking about it. And I'm sure my listeners will too. So I guess first of all, if we can start with, I'd say listeners to this show, they're a really conscious lot. We've done lots of shows on, topics like the body, inner child and stuff. But if you can just start, not like as if we're just talking as if we're completely dumb, but at a fairly simple level, talking about this whole idea of the inner child and the body and how you're seeing them as one. I think that would be a really useful place to start, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So when we are a baby, we have a very flexible, pliable nervous system, and that means we can learn anything at a rapid pace. We can learn, you know, English, Chinese, Arabic, whatever it is. It's all equal to a baby because information is not valued as in different preferences. There's no preference of information, so it all comes in equally. And as we develop and we create this this nervous system inside of us, it becomes imbued with certain values of culture. And this actually happens before a child is even born. And I've heard before, I can't prove this, but I've heard that a child with a French-speaking mother, their cry will end on an up note, and a child with a German-speaking mother, their cry will end on a down note. Simply because of the womb that they were birthed in. So that
goodness, I've never heard that. That's amazing.
Right. It is very interesting. And so that nervous system development already begins before the child is born. And so as we grow up in a certain type of culture, we have access to, we retain certain superhuman abilities, and this is where our genius shines through. And so it's different for everybody depending on our our birth chart and our environment that we grow up in, all these kinds of things. And so everybody has certain skills, and everybody is also shut off from certain skills. And the skills that people are not able to access, that is their birthright, that they should be able to access, is caused by trauma, which at the very core of it is shame. And I also call shame just compressed love or interpersonal disconnection. So it's a break in the connection to ourselves. And so our body is running on this shame imbued nervous system, and our body needs to be able to specifically relax in order to allow, which is also known as nurturing, in order to allow the extreme amount of power. And some people say it's as much power as like an atomic bomb that's wrapped up in the shame in our body. And so as I have done my processes and unlocked these pockets of shame within my nervous system, I've had huge explosions of power. And this has happened probably hundreds of times for me. And so tapping into these big wells of power, I've seen physical results manifest instantly as a result of opening these pockets of shame and giving me a whole different kind of relationship to reality. And so what I've discovered is that parts of our nervous system are still a child, and parts of our nervous system are adulting and embodying our genius. And so if we can relate to our nervous system as a child, we wouldn't bully ourselves so much, just like we wouldn't ever bully a crying child into stopping crying. Well, some people might, but it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, I love that. All makes so much sense. So a couple of things I'd just like to deepen into.
Sure.
There was that was weird. I just closed my eyes. It must have been like a combination of the lights, but I saw like a T-Rex on its side. Which is
wow, cool.
I don't know what combination of lights created that. That's completely interrupted me. Yeah, so sorry. The word of shame that you used, that really hooked me. I think there's something about the word shame that is really evocative.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested, I know you did give some other examples, but why the word shame as opposed to, I don't know, pain or I'm just trying to think of different ways that we can be traumatized and why you're seeing they kind of get trapped or stored as shame specifically.
Right. So let's say sadness is another word that people use. Sadness is our experience of allowing the shame to unravel.
Mm-hmm.
So grieving it's more like a grief is more like a verb. It's the unraveling of that shame. Anger is the rejection of that shame. It's the pushing away from it. So anger is always dependent on shame for its existence, and pain is still accurate, but shame helps people kind of touch a little bit more of what the pain is actually made of, and so it feels a little more specific.
And why is that what that's made of?
Because when a child is alone, or I'm sorry, when a child is young and wanting love, which is what children want, there is a desire for an adult to be nearby. And so when a child is crying and trying to achieve that, let's say the adult has a phone call and walks away and goes to answer a phone or something, that feels to the child like an interpersonal disconnection. It can be interpreted as a rejection. And so in that moment, shame can develop. And
gotcha. Yeah. Actually, the more I think of different examples, there's that underlying, I can't be lovable because otherwise this wouldn't be happening, or they wouldn't have left, or they wouldn't be doing this to me. Therefore, it's the shame of not being lovable, I suppose.
Exactly. And so everything else like builds on top of that foundation. Yeah.
That makes sense. Which I guess is why that word shame, like there has real power in it, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a very foundational issue. And I read a book on shame once that said a very interesting thing, which is, what's that? And the word is blanking on me. It's a C word. It's like, I can't remember the word actually, but it's a particular type of shame which only exists in certain family lines. And so certain types of shame are invented by culture and don't exist in indigenous tribes. And so it's a very interesting way, the way that, and it's not the shame itself, because shame is universal, but it's more of a worldwide phenomenon of how it's experienced, expressed, and perceived.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So let me just, before I had the dinosaur moment, let me just I want to ask you that about shame, and then there was something else. Yes. So I was really relating to what you were talking about in terms of when you've managed to look and work through those kind of pockets, those areas of shame, you've then seen kind of real tangible shifts. And, I can really relate to that, different work that I've done, different forms of shadow work, for example, I have seen really tangible shifts. But I'd love to know, specifically as you said, you use the word, you kind of said something like physical results. Would you mind sharing an example or two of that? Because I think it can be so hopeful for people listening to kind of like, oh, wow, these kind of shifts are possible.
Sure. So some of what I can share is a little bit reality bending and outside of the scope of what people normally consider to be like, plausible. So I could go into that, or I could stay practical as far as like what actually is helpful for people and what is actually something people can work toward reasonably.
Yeah. How about one of each?
Okay, cool. So when I'll put it this way, there's one of the main things that I work with is known as synchronicity or omens, or life getting in the flow with life, where we actually have evidence from, you could say, the universe or God. We have evidence that there is a bigger self at work. And so a lot of times this can be seen, and I've seen this in our work as something as simple as like, I will unravel a big energy, and then let's say I have a drum hanging on the wall. I'll actually hear it hit the drum, like bong, and it's a instant external demonstration of that energy. But then if it's a bigger energy, sometimes I'll be able to predict a loud sound like a plane flying by or a truck driving by, or it can even be bigger than that, like a earthquake I've experienced or a volcano, all kinds of things that have been an instant manifestation of this type of work because of the amount of collective energy that moves through us when we do this process. And I've noticed that as I heal deep collective parts of my nervous system, that reflects into millions of people, and I can see the effect of on the human race. And then practically, this results in amazing clarity for me and amazing ways of using language and gaining superpowers that I didn't know were possible, that I didn't know I could access. And when I do conversations like this, or when I do client work, I discover what I know all the time. So a lot of the time I didn't even know I knew something, and then it comes out because I have breakthroughs about like every 2 or 3 days. And so I constantly tap into new sources of availability to power or availability to information that I didn't have access to before.
I really dig that. I'm reading a book at the moment. In fact, I read the chap who wrote it's called William Whitecloud, and I just tore through his first book, The Magician's Way, and then went straight onto his new book without even bothering to read the title. So I can't remember the title. But he was a lot of his work is about kind of really what you're talking about here, tapping into our genius, and that kind of just real natural state, that natural flow. And he was sort of describing like levels of it, where we kind of start at the lowest level of inexpert imitation, for example, right through those levels where we just get that kind of purest, freshest, newest, just genius that we have access to when we're open to that. And it's ironically the thing that we value the most in our culture. We love it when we see evidence of other people allowing that level of genius come through, and yet everything on our culture is kind of driving us to kind of close down and just take the safe route of just copying and working by analogy. So it's I love what you're talking about here, and I think it can be even though you're giving practical examples, I think we're so unused to in kind of just day-to-day conversations valuing genius, valuing that newness, valuing that freshness, that can sound a bit kind of out there rather than something it should be. Really, our birthright should be available to each of us. So that's what I was really feeling like. That really is, the times where I feel tapped into that, there's nothing on earth like it. It's just such a gorgeous feeling. And yet we so devalue it because we're so hooked up on the survival stuff.
Right. Trying to achieve and I haven't read this book, Power versus Force, but I definitely resonate with the title, and people talk about this concept all the time. And it really is a big difference of, force coming from survival and true power kind of recognizing that we already have what we need and being able to one of my favorite books actually is called The Path of Least Resistance. And it describes the creative orientation versus the reactive orientation. And for me, that kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah, for sure. Gorgeous. Okay, we've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, but it was a good one. So, coming back to the body. So I think this was fairly obvious in what you said, but I just want to make sure that we're really, breaking this up as we go. Because again, I think these are this is kind of deep stuff that we're talking about, but it's also really practical. It's stuff that all of us could really do with knowing. And so if you're talking about, again, that sense of the trauma that we experience as children being stored as shame in our bodies, therefore, that's why speaking to them as one, nurturing them as one, makes sense. Yeah?
Yeah. And I've heard from Matt Kahn said this. He said, our mind is our spirit guide for our body. And that really resonated. I also like to say our mind is our inner parent, our body is our inner child.
Yeah, lovely. Because it's that we're speaking from to our body, stroke inner child. Yeah, love that.
Exactly.
So,
and I'll say one more thing about that that's very interesting. So with people in a male body, the emphasis tends to be more on the mind, and for people in a female body, the emphasis tends to be more on the body. And so what's extremely powerful is when we're able to switch polarities, and we're able to, the body tends to kind of run more automatically, where the mind is more like intentionally. And if we're able to switch those roles, where the body runs intentionally and the mind runs automatically, for a man, that is tapping into our inner feminine. Whereas for a woman, it's sort of, if the woman is able to reverse her polarity and tap into her inner masculine, that is where her superpowers are going to come from too. So we have this sort of not backward, but inverse wiring of each other. And this is what gives us models. Women are the models for what men are growing into, and men are the models for what women are growing into.
Now that's interesting. I'm kind of like, should I go down that tangent? No, I will do. It's too irresistible. So I was with you right up until you said the last bit about the superpowers. Not that I'm necessarily like, I sound like I'm like, you're wrong, I disagree with you. It's more like
you just want to go deeper. I understand.
No, it was, I was kind of disagreeing with you, but not like outright, like you're wrong. I was just,
okay.
It just felt, so what you said about for a woman, it kind of would be typically more associated with the body rather than the mind, vice versa for a man. That all really makes sense to me. And very much the work I do with women is connecting them more back into their body, because for many women in today's kind of Western culture, certainly, particularly women who have been kind of out there, making it in the business world, they've been generally very disconnected from their bodies. And that was certainly my journey. Like for years, it was almost like I didn't have a body. Like it was just like everything came from like above the neck.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, my own path, and then the work I've been doing with women has been very much kind of reclaiming the body, coming back into the body, resensitizing the body. And so everything you said made sense up until you said it was kind of almost like being able to flip the polarities to then kind of associate more with the mind is where your superpowers lie. Because I was thinking, but then isn't that what most women are already doing, because we're operating in such a masculine way? And I certainly didn't feel like I had access to my superpowers when I was operating all from in the mind. So I'm suspecting there's something I've not heard in what you're saying, but does that all that make sense that I've just said to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And I'll go deeper into it. So what is it that gives women permission to access the body? It's their mind. So that's kind of what I mean is women and female trauma craves to be fathered, whereas men and male trauma craves to be mothered. And so if the man is able to feel that he is able to mother himself, I like to say that my body is my girlfriend. I like to treat my body like, I go on a hot date. And so that gives me the experience of being mothered. And so then I don't crave women, because I'm able to embody what women offer. Whereas for a woman to feel safe, she is craving to be, her wounding is going to be craving more to be fathered. And so for her to feel safe, she needs to feel safe with her mind. And that is going to make it permissible to be in her body.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So give me an example of what you mean by being safe with her mind.
So our minds, when traumatized, when our bodies are traumatized, our minds will reflect that trauma in the form of thoughts. And so it can be very tempting to believe certain thoughts are true. And so a woman might hear, for example, you'll never be as good as this man, so you might as well blah blah blah, martyrdom, etc. So that's the mind, which is taking them away from embodiment. And so what she really needs is to be able to trust her mind and to purify the trauma so that the mind isn't trying to tempt her and lead her into self-sabotage in that way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what occurs to me, let me know if this is taking it off a bit left field, but what occurs to me, and I see this a lot in myself too. Pretty much anything I say, if I say see it in my clients, you can basically say I see it in me.
Sure. Yeah. We're all human here. Yeah.
Is for women in particular, is that kind of the lover archetype and the shadow of the prostitute. So the prostitute is saying, oh, I can't afford to speak my truth because what will others people think? Or if I do this, that will cost me. And so instead of like honoring our own value, our own expression, we think it's not going to be safe and it's going to cost us too much. And so what I'm taking from what you're saying and sort of translating it into that, it's like our mind has created that almost like a channel for how we're allowed to express and stay safe, which then limits our expression, which obviously includes our genius. Does that translate roughly to what you're saying?
Yeah, and I'll give you maybe a few more components to it, which is so what we're actually doing with the Christed mind is we're being able to operate from the perspective of the sun, which is, bird's eye view. You could say it's overseeing everything. And so if we're having a thought, like let's say you mentioned the prostitute thought, I should give up my body for safety, basically, or should give up my time or give up something for safety, then what we're given the opportunity here to actually do is to see that thought from the perspective of the sun. So from the bird's eye view, so that we can curate the experience. And actually what the addictive thought is asking for is not to end or not to avoid it, but to go into it and be able to experience the pain and the shame that's inside of the thought, I need to give up A for B. And once we're able to feel safe with our mind enough that we can enter it instead of avoid it or make it wrong, then that is the Christing of the trauma. And that is the connection of the sun to the earth, is using courage to connect to trauma, is using the sun to connect to the earth.
Yes, love that. That makes complete sense. So that, without taking it off too far again into the way that makes complete sense in the way that I would work with that kind of shadow, that kind of trauma. So that all makes huge amounts of sense. I love that. Would you give an example the other way around from man, and how you're saying that would be about connecting, creating safety in the body, and I'm guessing connecting with the earth. So can you give an example like that, please?
Yeah. So let's see. First thing that's coming up for me, I don't know exactly where this is going, but first thing that's coming up for me is there's this concept in trauma healing. There's a concept of top-down processing, and then there's a concept of bottom-up processing, right? So some people are able to get into their body and have no judgment of it and be able to transmute trauma simply through feeling without making any meaning. And then that ends up as clarity in the mind. Whereas other people tend to go in through the mind and figure something out, and then they'll end up, vomiting or coughing, or I see all kinds of things, and it permeates into the body from the top. Right. And so whether it's a man or a woman, my ideal method is to go from both at the same time. Right. And this is what is rarely done, because this is it takes a lot of skill or skill on behalf of a practitioner or a facilitator. Right. So men tend to seek out a woman to help them feel safe in the body so that they can realize things. Right. So now that I'm realizing I'm actually safe, I start to have information, because that's what men are naturally connected to is information, where women are naturally connected to the body. So this is the does that kind of answer your question?
Let me think.
Because if not, I'm happy to, if you want to say the question again.
So the way I heard it was, for women, it's about creating safety in their mind, which will then kind of release that trauma, which will then allow them to realize their genius, in kind of shorthand, is what I heard. With men, it's the reverse. But in a way, whether it's a man or a woman, it's kind of actually about creating safety in both places, like mind and body, ideally both ways. Does that roughly sum it up?
Yeah. So people will, like in women's work, they'll say, most often, like, come get in the body and we'll work this out. And in men's work, they'll be like, come
meditating
or decide you're the warrior, and like, bleep and do this, bleep, and so one is about, men's work is generally about deciding, be the masculine now, and women's work is generally about movement, be the feminine now. And so what I've discovered is that it's possible to do both at the same time, and we don't need to leave any of it out. And that creates this very holistic and powerful transformational experience, which kind of gets it from both angles, so that we can honor the inside outing process. Because I'll say this could be a big tangent, but I want to sum this next part up really, really succinctly, and you can ask me more if you want to. So there's this concept of behaviorism, which is something big I've been speaking about lately. And behaviorism is pointing at behavior, analyzing behavior, prescribing behavior for the purpose of achieving a reward or a punishment. Right. And so behaviorism, because it's in a reward or punishment paradigm, is inherently a limited paradigm. And so
like Pavlov's dogs is a kind of like simple example of that, isn't it?
The pattern of what?
Pavlov's dogs.
Pavlov. Pavlov's dogs. Yeah. So if the ringing of the bell in Pavlov is doing leads to food, it can be the same thing. Like, if you become masculine, women will like you. If you become feminine, men will like you. So this is this is a behaviorist perspective. And if we're able to step out of behaviorism, where we're no longer tempting ourselves with reward or scaring ourselves with punishment, it gives us a opportunity to step into the truth, the true version of ourselves. And so,
an unprescribed truth of ourselves.
And so going into the opposite energy of our gender is going away from that reward paradigm. because it's much more scary for the opposite of our gender, and it takes so much more courage than going into what our gender more traditionally is, and that creates balance very rapidly, because if nothing can scare us, nothing can scare us.
Yeah. So it's not like you're saying, I don't know, for women doing kind of feminine embodiment practices has no value, isn't of use. It absolutely is, but not. But on its own is going to have limited value, because it's almost like, okay, just become more feminine, rather than that kind of more whole
exactly
sense, creating that spaciousness, that safety.
Exactly. Yeah,
that makes a huge amount of sense. Brilliant. Right. So where I'd like to take this now, and again, really hit me when you were saying this, was talking, and it'd be interesting actually to bring this, what you've just been talking about, the masculine, feminine, men, women, this, talking to your body with a sense of affection.
You got to be careful how we talk to our body.
And that's what's happened to my mind today. A sense of affection. And, you even suggested using a term of endearment, like I think the examples you gave were my precious, or I don't know, it was my love or my darling, which I thought was wonderful. So I'd love you to say, and I think that in itself, again, really simple, practical thing that anyone can understand. I think there's real power there. So I loved that. So I'd love you to say a bit more about that. And also, if there is some correlation to what we've just been talking about, masculine, feminine, men, women, bring that in too, please.
Sure.
And then tie it with a nice neat bow.
Okay, yeah, will do. So as we've discussed, the goal here is really to anchor our inner parent so that we can have a sustainable and creative perspective on the point of being the spirit guide of the body. And so what that means practically is giving ourselves loving guidance, giving ourselves the opportunity of being seen. And it can be very tempting simply to try and maintain ourselves and try and maintain health or try and maintain feeling good. But that temptation is always based on reward and punishment paradigm. So as we step out of reward and punishment, we step out of maintenance and we step into actual deepening and a constant curation of our evolution. And so what that means is whenever we have what we perceive as a negative thought or a negative emotion, it's a chance to acknowledge where that pain is coming from in the body. And even if it's only a thought and we don't have an awareness, if we have a numbness about the pain, it's still an opportunity and an invitation to dive deeper into that pain so that we can really discover what is actually happening and what do we actually need. And let's say I'm having a thought, let's say I'm a woman, I'm having a thought, maybe if I give it up for this man, he'll want to date me and take care of me or something. And so if we can follow the energy of that thought into the body, it might be pain around the heart, and we can listen to it and we can say, oh my gosh, I hear you. Yeah, I hear that you feel lonely. I hear that you feel unsafe. I hear, sweetie, that you feel unloved and that you need something. So what does it feel like you really need? Do you need to be held? Do you need to dance? Do you need to, really deepening into it, and also not just being the divine mother, but also challenging what you think you need and being the divine father and going deeper and deeper into, well, I hear that you're saying you need a man. Is that really true? Or do you just need to feel safe? And what would actually cause you to feel safe? And and using self-inquiry in that way to dig deeper into what is the actual need. And the only way that's going to work is if we're speaking to that very vulnerable and very tender space from a perspective of, well, sweetie, that doesn't seem quite true. Or, well, my love, that doesn't seem like you're giving me the whole story, and really honoring it, because it's not going to give us more information if it feels in any way abused or not tolerated.
Yeah, completely. I love that. And it reminds me very much how I might either speak to my children or, to a large extent, how I'd speak to my clients.
Yeah.
And it really is that sense of, real love and safety and care that allows us to have the courage to go to those places.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's very profound, and I do this in my work. I do sort of like, when I do energy work myself, I kind of do a big, like a big pull a big courageous pull of how do I say it, of my intention into my energy field. And then I pull out a bunch of guck, and I tend to like burp it up is the way I move energy. And as I do that, it reveals a lot of, ancient fear. It reveals a lot of, oh my God, am I going to survive this? And the only way that doesn't re-traumatize myself is because I fully commit to honoring whatever that is without condemning it, without judging it, without trying to make it, wrong, even though it is technically unreasonable, but it's not wrong for existing. And so I need to really recognize the differentiation between knowing it's unreasonable and still, being able to treat it with respect.
Yeah. Because I guess, scared, shamed parts of us aren't going to be reasonable.
Exactly. And so it's illogical, but if we're coming from a hyper masculine and disembodied perspective, then we're going to make something that's illogical wrong, and it's not.
Yeah. No, I love that. So a couple of things just came to mind. One was, and I'm guessing you've heard this too with your clients, when I may have done similar inquiries with clients around kind of where they're feeling it in their body, where that is in their body, where that's held in the body. Some can answer that. Some have that kind of amount of connection with their body that can feel it. Others don't. And I noticed that something, it seems, does come with us being able to kind of resensitize our body through embodiment practices. So again, it's kind of what you're saying there about, we access it via the mind, and yet it's kind of is felt in the body. Therefore, both kinds of practices are really valuable. So I just want to see if you would agree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the way that I experience it is, first of all, in order to begin an embodiment practice, the mind needs to agree, right? Somebody who says, I don't want to do it, isn't going to do it.
Yes.
Right. So the mind has to be on board to some degree. And then in the actual experience of embodiment, we can engage our mind to the degree where we can, the biggest thing that I found is giving ourselves permission to express ourselves, and specifically through our voice. So if I am dancing, which is amazing, I love dancing, it's really great. And if I use my mind to curate that experience, then I might say, you know what? It would actually be more beneficial if I sing while I'm dancing. And I hadn't thought of that, and it doesn't feel comfortable, but I'm intentionally giving myself permission to do it with my mind so that the embodiment becomes a more holistic practice.
Yeah. In fact, what you've just said, I just also thought this can be the real challenge. Maybe this is too big a segue to make at this point where we need to close down. But I think this really speaks to the power of both types of practices. And I noticed that when I'm working, I take women through a course, I suppose you could call it a program, called Waking Wild Feminine, which has a lot of embodiment practices. Some just take straight to them like a duck to water, like love them, get tons from them like immediately. Others have such resistance to seemingly really simple practices. And I wonder if there is a kind of, like you're saying, like a permission in the mind where it's like, I spent quite a lot of time trying to really understand this. Like I didn't have that same resistance. I've had other resistance, just to be clear, but I've never really had a resistance when it comes to embodiment practices. And I wonder if there is almost like this subconscious realization of how powerful it will be to resensitize. And so that kind of stops us to even allow the embodiment to happen, to then resensitize.
Exactly. And so really what that resistance is saying is, my shame, or I'm identified with my shame. And so my shame says, don't do it, because my shame will actually dissolve and my identity will change if I do it. And I'm afraid that, my identity changing means that I will die.
That's big stuff.
Yeah. So people could generally, in that situation, people could benefit from a coaching experience in advance where they can really recognize what is on the other side of that shame is not death, but it's actually life.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't really got time to really go there now, but I think even just talking to that level is helpful, because, that's almost like a meta level of shame. It's not even a kind of like shame you can isolate to parts of your body. It's like kind of overall, like it's on lockdown because there's just so much there. I can't even start to look.
So it kind of takes, like, really adulting really means assuming that we're operating from a perspective of shame and that it's not always true, and that there's some level of distortion causing us to think we need things that we don't actually need. So that's the bigger level of the bird's eye view, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for saying that. I think just even that already gives you a level of altitude to even be able to kind of look down and go, oh yeah, it's because it's shame.
Exactly. And so we can just predict that. It makes it a lot easier so that we don't feel confused all the time.
It's a kind of, there's real power in just naming something, isn't there?
Exactly. Because that's a key point, actually, is shame requires secrecy to exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. We're out of time. And
cool.
This is one of these conversations I could just get lost in and just keep going. But we do come out. Where... I feel like there's just like, there's so many kind of loose ends. It can go very far.
It can go forever. I know how it goes. That's why I keep writing and making videos and all this stuff.
This is fantastic. What would you think would be a really helpful thing to leave listeners with? Like if you could kind of, I don't know, leave with either a practical exercise or just a kind of something that you haven't had a chance to really speak about yet, in just the last minute or so that we've got, what would that be?
Honestly, the best thing I could recommend is I have a lot of writings on these topics, and I have a lot of videos on these topics so people can go deeper. My YouTube channel has a lot of cool things, and I think it's like, 10 hours of content or something like that. So, and it's all free. So whatever calls to you, explore, and there will be more coming. And I have. You mind if I share my Facebook group?
Oh no, go for it.
So the Facebook group is called The Truth Dojo. My organization and website is called The Quantum Theater, which is spelled the American way, theater. So quantum.theater, and has a lot of very interesting writings and newsletter. Sign up if you want to stay updated with the upcoming writings. And the YouTube channel is also found on that website under the free video section. And I'll just also announce that for the month of February, I have a experiment running, which is pay what you can one-on-one personal theater sessions. And so that accomplishes exactly what we've been describing, which is going into the trauma in a safe way that is fun and using role-playing techniques. And so the pay what you can setup is recommended between $55 and $555. Some people pay closer to one, some people pay closer to the other. And so this is just my personal curation of trusting God experience for myself, that I'll get what I need. Yeah.
Sure. And you can do those sessions virtually online.
Yeah, it's pretty much exclusively over Zoom video chat. Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous. Wonderful. Did you gave the URL? Yes, you did. I think I got hooked up on like American Spelling of Theatre. And I was thinking, I don't know that. And then when you said, I was like, of course I do. Right. Wonderful. Oh, This has just been, really, I feel like I'm kind of like, there's so much more I want to ask you. We may well have to come back and do a part.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's been a blast talking with you, and thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing.
Oh, and thank you. This is, very much needed work. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And so maybe today I'll be changing my name on Facebook officially to Joshua FalconCrest. And at the moment it's Joshua Falcon Gray. So yeah, look me up either way, and feel free to add me as a friend.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joshua. This has just been such a joy. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you. It's really been a blast, and love your energy, and you're doing amazing work as well. Thank you so much.
Wow. I found that such a powerful episode. Here are my main takeaways. We can hold the premise that our body equates our inner child to our body because shame is held in the body, or more specifically, our nervous system, by the trauma that we experienced as very young children. Opening these pockets of shame allows us to release the power that's been held there. Joshua's seen that men tend to be more identified with their minds, whereas women is vice versa. The work to open our pockets of shame is most effective when we can create safety in the mind and body, and the courage to make changes. I love Joshua's suggestion of speaking to our bodies with a sense of tender parenting, including using terms of endearment. This is a practice that I've adopted personally, and whilst it's too soon to say that I've seen big changes, what I can say is that it feels like a very wise and loving thing to do. If you'd like to get the notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 270. And if you're feeling the call to either Waking the Wild Masculine or Waking the Wild Feminine, then go along to primalhappiness.co/WTWF for Waking the Wild Feminine, or primalhappiness.co/WTWM for Waking the Wild Masculine, and let us know. And just to remind you, the spaces are intentionally limited to create the most powerful experience, and they get filled up fast. So if you're feeling it's for you, take action now to be sure of your place. If you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, or your Android or iOS app of choice and hit subscribe. That way you'll get each episode straight to your device as if by magic. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.